We are here on the Forward Movement podcast with someone who's so special to me. We work together in the world of education. This woman is Hailey Moschella, and she is here to share her perspective and share her lived experience regarding the world of ed and the conversation of education reform and restoration. So, Hailey, my dear friend, open up and share a bit about yourself with all who are listening here.
Hello, Renee. I am so happy to be here. You and I have had many conversations over the months, nearing years that we've known each other, and I'm thrilled to be here in the space with you today. So here we are. I mean, I have been in the classroom, the current Montessori setting for over 5 years. And prior to that, working in different classroom environments, working mainly with primary, early childhood ed, preschool, kindergarten age. And I have two of my own, as you know. So my children are 3 and 10. And what a ride it is. Just every day is a new experience at home, in the classroom. I'm always blown away by how much I'm learning, working firsthand with children, and how my kids are teaching me every day about how to show up and be present. And I love kind of looking at how I parent, how I guide in the classroom, and having a lot of those wonderings with you too. And it's so wonderful um, to share that experience with you and with our wonderful team in our environment, to be able to brainstorm and connect and have these wonderings together as a team. So I really value that.
Valuing that community connection and the wisdom of nuggets that are moving through the children receiving us. Hailey, how has the act of forward movement transformed your life?
How has the act of forward movement transformed my life? Ooh. Hmm. I have never thought about that, Renee. So I guess let me think for a moment. The act of forward movement. I think responding to those around us, responding to what's coming from our heart, from our soul, instinctively, listening to the children that we're serving and following them. Really, I think a lot of what we do or strive to do is stop and observe and listen. I think it's hard in our day to day to remember to do that, or maybe there are things taking place, needs, behaviors that are pulling us from that place of observation. But I think ultimately, the key in all of this is to just stop and observe and see what unfolds. So that's how I'll respond to that.
Beautiful. And in what ways, Hailey, have you individually stopped and observed, whether it be your own experiences as a student yourself or for the children in your own life? What has come forward that has supported you on this journey so far?
Mm. I think it's different at home and in the classroom. And I think a lot of those there's a lot of overlap. Um, but I think like at home, when I look at my own children, my own family, I think about patterns, and like how conscious often parents are of like, maybe we try really hard not to repeat the patterns of our own upbringing, and just like the consciousness of that, of feeling maybe our parents coming through us and how that feels, how we show up. Sometimes it's a positive attribute that we want to bring to our parenting. Other times we're trying to push that part of us away. So I think I that comes up a lot for me. Um, And I think just naturally, just to be honest, like there's a lot of guilt as a parent, I think, of just questioning of like, am I showing up enough? Am I showing up in the right way? Um, and just the not knowing. It's like you just have this faith that everything is going to work out, right? And you have to just show up and put one foot in front of the other and make the best decision that you can in that moment by responding to our children's needs. And um, yeah, I think in the classroom too, these moments, and you and I have like had these moments intermittently throughout our time together where we can just stop and watch, right? Where we choose not to step in if a child is not seeking out our support or there's ideally the classroom, as we've talked about, will kind of just run on its own and we can simply be there as observers. So, of course, within reason, right? But how beautiful that would be. And those moments are when we do see that show up, when we do see children working together to solve a problem, to, one child is in need of something instead of just calling for help to, the wide atmosphere. They have a child there to support them, to bring them a towel, to clean up a spill, to, help them tie their shoes. And when we take a step back, I think that's when the development happens in and out of the classroom.
And I love this, Haley, because you and I in this moment are pulling our life experience from a Montessori setting. And it's very, very different from other educational settings. So, for anyone tuning in who may not know what this is, Haley, do you mind opening up a bit about the Montessori setting and what you feel is the most powerful contribution to youth as a whole when it comes to this philosophy and way of teaching?
Absolutely, Renee. Yeah, I think it's because I've been so immersed in it since my son was began attending 7 years ago when he entered primary as a 3-year old. So it's like all I've seen, and it's hard to kind of like know what else is going on out there in the education setting because this is like I'm so immersed in it. So I was fortunate to find this network of the Wildflower Montessori schools. And in addition to having the Montessori principle as one of their principles, which Montessori being child-led, fostering independence, and there's so much of Montessori. Um, but in addition to that aspect, it's also there's small micro schools, teacher led. So the idea being that the teacher who knows the child is also on the administrative side of things. And this, as we know, has ups and downs, right? It's a lot of work. So it's really important to have a partner in running one of these Montessori schools, these wildflower schools, or multiple people coming together to work together to run the school, as we're fortunate to have. And also being really community embedded as a shop front setting is one of the principles. So to be part of the community, and that to me is one of the that I was really most drawn to, as well as the equity principle, because I felt like we're so disconnected from the society that our children are entering after school. So to have this experience where they take walks in the neighborhood, they know the businesses, they know where the post office is, they know that they can enter the library and leave with books that they can take home and read with their families. And we've visited the fire stations and just all of these experiences that the children, I think, will just have a lasting effect on their lives. And to me, that I'm most drawn to that aspect. And the Montessori is part of the environment, absolutely. But it's not to me so much the materials, but it's how we respect the child, how we get down at their level, how we talk with them like the human beings that they are, not a child that we're teaching at, but teaching alongside, and learning together. So I really just appreciate that. Um, Marie Montessori spoke about these sensitive periods too, and that's something I think about too, is like really listening and watching. That's where the observation comes in, because when they're kind of ripe for learning something, whether it's language or math or um, anything, order and concentration is such a big part of the how we give lessons. Um, it just shows that like we respect them, and we're hearing them, we're responding to what they're showing us that they want to learn. So they're not going to come up to us and say, I want a language lesson, but we're watching what they're doing. And that would ideally be how a successful classroom runs, and so I'm really grateful for this. I really do feel like it could work for every child, because the idea being that we are responding to the individual child. So as long as the resources are in place, and that is one thing with this environment, is that we don't always have the resources that other settings have, but um, I feel fortunate that we can serve um, you the a lot of children, and we've had this experience too, where we do take a step back, and we have asked ourselves, is this the best environment for this child? I mean, simple things, right? Like where we have glass and we have real materials in the classroom, um, but there needs to be a level of respect received from the child, as well as respect given to the child from the guides.
Mm. Haley, and so much of what you're speaking of your experience, and so much of what I've been experiencing myself for about 2 years now in this setting with you is very much not possible in other school settings, in other educational settings. And some of it is very possible. So I feel like when we're speaking about stepping back and observing the children, that's something that can happen anywhere. And Haley, I do wonder, as an educator and also as a parent who's in conversation with other educators advocating for your child as well, because that's a really important part of the conversation about education reform and restoration is it's not only the school, but it's what's supportive for the families at home as well. Because if it's not supportive for the families, anything that's happening in the school is not going to be long-standing. So, when it comes to the slowing down and observing, does that does that also connect with you as an educator and you as a parent? Do you find that you benefit from stopping down, slowing down, and witnessing your own patterns and your own behaviors? I
Mm.
feel like that's most supportive for the student itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of being a successful observer, is watching those that we want to guide and to support, but also looking at how we respond to them and what comes up in those moments. Are we triggered? Are we reactive? Are we shutting down? Are we running away from a situation? Like all of that is so important, because that's what shows up for them too, right? So that's something I think I put less time into and less energy, but it's equally important to be able to observe ourselves and our patterns, and just notice like, okay, so when, I notice that I'm reacting to this, or what's triggering about this for me. And um, I think, yeah. And one thing that a teacher leader at another school in our network here said that has always stuck with me. It was when my youngest was in the infant toddler program, and she said something along the lines of like, it's not about them, it's about how we respond to them. And that's something that I've thought about. I even heard something along those lines similarly in therapy years ago, of like responding to our partner, our friends, or, those that we love. And when we're feeling hurt or attacked, it's not necessarily about what they're doing, it's about how we're, responding to that. And it's about reflecting and not reacting. Because I think we're, human beings. I know that I'm very sensitive, and take things very personally. But when a child is acting out or they're showing something, or they're frustrated and they're taking off, and I'm wondering, well, why can't I get them to sit with me and have a lesson? Well, it's how I'm approaching them. I mean, that's what I feel like it comes down to. And we talked about this recently of like, we might get frustrated or not have a lot of patience depending on how we wake up that day or something that we're taking into the classroom with us. But how do we I think the more that we just take a moment and just take a breath and just remind ourselves, this child is obviously struggling. We don't need to like bring in our own, whatever the situation might be. And like, um, it's just a good practice and we can't do it 100% of the time. I know I certainly can't, but just that awareness of knowing like, okay, it's not me that they're attacking personally, whether it's a child in the classroom, a friend of mine, a partner, a child of mine, but it's just they need something. How can I show up for them and not bring myself into it and centering them and not me? Um, so that's just an important reminder that again, it's something that's like an ongoing practice of for me being less reactive, especially at home when I want to kind of fix everything and I want my children to feel safe and secure and loved and feel like they can come and talk with me. So I really struggle when they don't want to talk or they do shut down and I just wonder, well, why can't you open up? I want to be there for you. So just knowing that it's okay to like take a moment and not make it about us. Really, I think it's important to know that it's not about us and it's about what they need and want in that moment.
Hailey, this is so powerful. And what keeps pinging in, so for everyone tuning in, Hailey and I are doing a book club, and it's Me and White Supremacy. And I hope it's okay I'm saying this, Hailey.
Of course.
Too late now. So, Me and White Supremacy, and the author is Layla. I'm not sure her last name. And great, great book, great read, amazing, eye-opening reflections to lean into. And something that keeps coming up is the white centering. And it's really powerful, Hailey, to hear you speaking right now about the children's experiences and bringing our own self in, because my mind is going to like white centering. And regardless if there's children in the class who are pupils who are of color, that that matters. And also, it doesn't in the way that if we're centering ourselves in their learning environment, that could be harmful just as white centering in a group of individuals who are here to be centered, not us, or to raise their voice or elevate their voice. And so that's something that's coming through in a connection I've never made before,
Mm,
really, because we are just like the youth. It's my belief. Like I'm very always focused on me. Of course,
mm,
I'm giving to others and but at the end of the day, my world, like I'm main character. And I feel like that's so common for so many people, especially our youth too. So to cultivate that empathy and compassion towards one another and also respecting and honoring our own experiences of emotions moving through us at any given time is important. And Hailey, for fun, and we're going to play, and I've never done this before, but we're going to do it anyways, because I
yay.
feel like this is a really powerful experience for our educators who are out there who are more maybe haven't really done that stepping back and observing their own patterns, or they have, but they don't have that community who are supporting them in that as well, fellow educators. So, without being in the classroom right now, Hailey, is there a certain pattern that you can feel into? Maybe it's the first thing that comes to mind that keeps repeating for you as an educator in the classroom that you would like to bring to the conversation right now and maybe unpack it a little bit or get curious about it.
Mm. The pattern that shows up for me in the classroom as an educator.
Mhm.
I think the need to have some sense of control of the environment. And this also goes back to that, like, it's not about centering me, it's about centering the children that we're working with, right? And it is their environment truly. And that's what's beautiful about Montessori is that it is the child's environment, or it should be. So thinking about that and how I strive when there's a sense of order and focus and quiet and calm. So to be able to kind of let go when things get a little rowdy, a little escalated, a little bit loud, within like a safe level, right? But to know that also it's natural for that to kind of ebb and flow, and that's even part of the this Montessori idea of it there being like this peak during their work time where things made me get a little chaotic, and then it becomes a more deeply concentrated work time. So we may not ever get past that point because maybe it feels like, okay, we need to respond to this. When I say we, it's like myself or collectively in the environment, and thinking about like, we see it's getting a little, there's a little bit more commotion than feels comfortable for our nervous system. So we gather, we bring a book in, we bring some movement, we take a walk, we get outside. It's like we respond to that instead of just watching. And I think a lot of it is this personal need to have a sense of calm and control in what may feel like a sometimes chaotic environment. So, how do we let that chaos be within, like a reasonable amount, right? Just to kind of see what comes of that. And again, I'm not talking about like children getting physical with one another or harming each other, staff, or materials, but more just like voices are noisy. Children are working together when we have them do one person work, and just to say like, you know what, this is what they're drawn to. If we're truly wanting to respond to them, let's watch that. And I think we have the ability to do that. And I'm grateful that we can together support each other in that. So maybe one of us, does get a little bit like, this is too much for me. Maybe we offer them like, how does it feel to go outside sooner? But maybe instead of that, we invite the teacher to go for a walk, and then we just kind of observe. And I'm just like kind of like thinking as I'm talking to of like, okay, maybe it's actually what we're responding to is not what the children are asking of us through their actions, but what we can handle internally or not handle, right? So maybe we just are a little bit more flexible and just say, this is hard right now. This is noisy. I'm just going to go. Maybe when it gets really hard, that's when we do sit down. And actually, Renee, as I'm thinking about this, you shared something with me. Maybe it was in regards to being a projector about like when we're feeling like go, 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 like we need to, and feel free to like jump in and chime in about what this is exactly, but this sense of like um fast pace, like getting things done, that's when we need to just pause and stop. And I
Mm.
think about that a lot. And this could be one of those instances in the classroom where it's like there's so much happening, so let's like feed into that. Let's gather everyone, let's herd them out the door, let's do something. But instead, maybe that's when we stop and just see.
I
So
love this. I love that you're bringing this up. So, everyone, projector, if you don't know, is a type of a human design type. So, there are five: manifestor, manifesting generator, generator, reflector, projector. And there's a movement or a community called the projector movement. And this is birthing from Charlie and Sarah. They are married, they are both projectors. And when I took a class from them, they speak about how a projector has an open energy center, meaning that projectors are really amplifying the energy around them. So they're feeling that energy to do way more than maybe the person who has that consistent energy to do. Not to say projectors don't have that energy to do, it just isn't as consistent. So, what they guided me and community to do is called a projector pause or a sacral pause. It was more sacral pause. And I love this, Hailey, because as you're sharing, my mind also goes towards all of the educators out there who it's just them in the classroom with maybe 25 to 32 students, or they have one para or whatever it may be. And regardless if you're a projector or not, it doesn't matter in this example because you can still pause and you can witness everything moving around you and still pull everything back to you. So, in other words, I'm feeling chaotic in a classroom, and since I'm feeling chaotic, I'm not feeling safe. And since I'm not feeling safe, I need to arrange the classroom environment to make it feel safe so I am safe. Because I am a mandated reporter, and my number one job is also to ensure that every child is safe. So, when I'm not feeling safe, how could they be safe? That's kind of what's processing through me. So in that moment where I'm not feeling safe, that doesn't mean they're not safe. That just means their children really like being little scientists and exploring the next step of their journey to discover where they're going next. And in that messy process of crossing and scribbling and yelling or like quickly walking slash low-key running, I can stop, sacral pause, maybe close my eyes if other educators are available to witness, or not close my eyes and ground the feet and remember, like, maybe put my hands on my body or maybe like hug my body. And by doing that, I'm providing safety for myself, and simultaneously, I am modeling to the youth how an adult manages their own experience. And I feel
Mm,
like I do this, and you do this so often, Haley, as well, is when we are feeling a certain way, we do slow down, or when we react in a certain way, we go and apologize to the child if it's been harmful for them anyway. And I feel like this is so potent, Haley, of the pausing, because that control happens in every classroom. That control is the classroom. That control is the educational system. Hello, testing. Or even if it's not in testing, I am almost certain that your son's school has some aspect of control in one way or another. And I feel like control is safe in a certain way, like that to have. Or maybe you can tune in here. What's the difference for you between control and structure when it
mm.
comes to the setting?
Yeah, I think structure is what I would like to see, like the structure as far as, and this is something that currently has been in my mind the last few months of wanting to implement structure and having consistency of what that looks like. Like it is just as important at home, I believe, to have like this expectation, or children know that after they take a bath, it's brushing teeth and it's reading a book. They have this expectation that there will be a parent or a loved one putting them to bed every night. Um, and I think same in the classroom of like, I enter the classroom, I do this, this, and this. And I think that gives them security. I truly believe that. And I think that's something I'm struggling with because I want to see more of that structure implemented. Um, and I think if it was like a perfect situation for me, there would be structure where children know that after they finish a work, they push their chair and then they bring the work to the shelf. So it's ready for the next child. When there's a spill, they know where to get the towel, wipe it up, and hang it up. All these things are in place to support the environment that we want to see, where the children run their own environment because it is there. So that if that structure was there and they had all those things in place, they had, maybe those first weeks that is called normalization in a Montessori environment, weeks, sometimes months, where those rules or these expectations are implemented and taught at the beginning. Then the control, right, to me is like, if that's all happening, right, if they're respectful of one another, if they take care of themselves, their environment, then that control will kind of follow, right? So it's like if they kind of go off where maybe the expectation is they do one person work, but we watch a child kind of gravitate to another and just start working with them. That's where that like element of wanting to control, we can kind of let go of because we know that they're exploring safely, intuitively. But it's like if we don't have the structure in place, it's really hard to have to balance the control. So I think what we're dealing with is trying to implement some sort of structure while also trying to control an unstructured environment. But if you have the structure, I think there will be a control, and say if the volume increases, it gets louder in the environment, as long as there's the structure in place where, the children are being respectful to themselves and others in the environment, that 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 control will be easier for us, for myself, to be able to kind of step back from and say, they've got it, they've got it. But if we're also looking at like volumes going up and they're like kind of just being haphazard with materials and their selves and others, that's when it gets really tricky, I think, because then we're looking at like, could this um become like a safety issue, right? Of like, they don't have that understanding or respect. um how are they going to know when to like bring it back down? But if they have that in place, that's those like those limits, right? Within reason. So there still should be limits of what can and can't be done, or what should or shouldn't be done. But yeah, I think that's how I feel about that. I think if there is a strong structure that is just known and consistent across the board among our children and our staff, all of us, then that control feels a little bit more comfortable, or
Mm.
lack of it, I guess.
I love what you're saying, Haley, because when we're speaking about the volume of the classroom, for me personally, as an educator, this is my number one, I feel, pattern within me that I'm always trying to suppress. And the more that I'm doing, you know, certain internal reflections, the more I realize that I'm really suppressing the voices of the children. And right now, I'm doing, as we're recording this, a social media detox. This is run and facilitated by a man named BC. And yesterday was day 4, and he mentioned something about your voice. And the day was all about like utilizing your voice and allowing any vocal expression to move through fluidly. And it got me thinking, Haley, of how often like Quiet Coyote comes out and how
Mm,
often I'm like, shh, shh, stop, especially in the nap room. Like I'm really, ah, and talk about like shame. As a parent, I'm not a parent yet, although as a educator, like that comes off for me often. I'm always second guessing my choices, or I'm always like, Renee, that was too much. Like you're not allowing these children to be their authentic expression. And I wonder how it would be if we implement the tools available. So there's something called the loop. I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm gonna invest in it. I was talking to one of our parents, Haley, about this yesterday or the other day. So they're like noise canceling and they're
mm,
really, really itty bitty. They just like go in your little ear right there. And I really have little ears, so it is a little ear for me. Your little ear, and then it minimizes the sound. And there's three, well, what I know, three different levels of like noise canceling. So one is like you can still hear things, but just like shh. And the other one is like it's kind of like really blocking it out. And then the third is like you're on an airplane and everything's silent. Boom. And I'm like, Renee, honey, we're gonna get the loop, the loop ear bit, and we're gonna put it in and put on the lowest setting, and then go into classroom and just witness how the body's sensations are when the classroom environment is
mm,
active. Because it's, once you said, it's not about me. And like my job is literally to be there and support them. So if I am there and doing the opposite of supporting them by suppressing their voices, then what am I doing? It's causing harm. It's causing harm, because then they're going to get into elementary school and middle school and they're not going to feel like they can share their voice because the teacher in their youth told them that they need to be quiet,
mm,
specifically connected to the children who may have different challenging behaviors in a classroom setting. And I know when I look back in my own journey of being an educator, like that every face comes to my mind when it comes to the child who wasn't in able to like acclimate or change who they are to fit the structure. And even though Montessori is different, it's still a structure and container, and we're still asking the children to change who they are to be a part of this structure in a certain way, at least in the environment that I feel like we are experiencing. And I wonder, Hailey, when it comes to children who exhibit behaviors that are more challenging, how do you feel? How do you feel the educational structure could maybe shift to support children? Or do you feel that there are certain children who really truly don't benefit from being in certain environments? Or is it a bit of both?
Mm. I do think it could be both. I think, if we had unlimited resources, if we could bring in more staff, we've talked about this to be able to offer like one-on-one for support to children that need it, um, then I think absolutely, I do feel like a Montessori environment, if that structure is in place, if the team is working beautifully together, if we had the staff that we needed, and some that could look different, it could look like there are 30 or 29 um, children with 3 staff, and that's hard to imagine right now, but maybe sometimes it looks like that, or maybe sometimes it looks like there's 15 children with 3 staff, depending on the needs. So I think a lot of it comes down to that, is like if we're really going to follow the child and look at their needs, it's adapting what we can offer to. But that's not realistic, right? In our environment, or in most environments, like you can't just decide like, oh, actually, we're doing good, like let's back off, because honestly, sometimes too many adults can hinder that environment too. So um but again, we can't just like decide, oh, we have this sort of roster right now of students, we can pull one, or we can add in other. We don't have that luxury. Most schools don't, but I think in that environment, in that ideal world, that we could serve any child, every child. um I think there are so many different needs, and truly we can't offer support for all the needs of every child, developmentally, behaviorally. So I do think there are certain things that all children need. They need a voice, right? They need to be heard. They need that outside time. That's something we agree on, is like they just need to get out. They need to explore. They need fresh air. Um, and yeah, I think some environments where maybe children don't have as much control of themselves, maybe an environment where everything is so accessible, like in our environment, like everything is at their level, trays with glasses. And I don't mean like dropping things, but if 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 they don't have the tools, um, to help them communicate, but they resort maybe to being physical with materials or others, then it is a challenging environment, I think. And but again, ideally, like if a child needed more, there would be staff to support that. But we know that that's not always possible. Even if it ends up being what happens, we also see that it can take away from the development of other students too. Um, so it's hard to say, because I haven't really seen firsthand the results of a child being transferred from an environment where there's a bit more freedom, into a more structured environment where children are sitting at desks. And I do wonder, I have thought about this, like, are certain children who can't handle that amount of freedom? And again, ideally this freedom is within those limits. If we have the structure in place, it's safe amount of freedom, and there's expectations. But if those expectations are not being met or implemented or reinforced, then that sense of freedom is too overwhelming for a child. So I do wonder if, sort of having the other side of like being in a very structured environment can actually help support. But again, I really do feel like if we had that structure, those limits, um, not to be, uh, you know, for children to understand them, then I think that it would work for most, if not all, students.
Absolutely. And as you're speaking, Haley, we're specifically talking about children who are younger in that early childhood setting. There are conversations previous in the season that do focus more on the higher ed spectrum. So if you're curious about that, go tune into those. With this conversation, I resonate with you, Haley, because with a younger group of children, I do feel that that sitting at desk actually isn't supportive for any of the younger children. It's not supportive of their development. Um, and maybe that means that there is like a tiny percentage of children who would benefit from that super structured setting. Yet, and also, there's so much beauty to see these children witnessing, and this is a mixed age as well, and I think there is benefit to this. I feel like when it comes to education restoration and reform, we can look at mixing ages together in a classroom setting. So the younger ones are observing the older ones, and the older ones are able to have the responsibility and sensation of what it's like to support someone else. I asked one of the older children the other day to go help me by waking up some of the children from nap. And I could just see the child they woke up walked out so calmly from the nap room. And the
Mm,
child behind was so proud. I'm like,
mhm,
you really supported that child from getting up from their nap in a safe way. I can see. Thank you for that support. And it was so different, Haley, because how I wake these children up who they supported, like I pick their body up and put them in a chair because they cannot wake up. So to witness that like another child is able to succeed what I cannot succeed with, which is offering the
mm,
child time to gently rise them. As an educator caring for all the other children, you can't
mm,
focus that one-on-one attention. This is why I picked them up because it's like, oh, we gotta like we have an efficiency
mhm,
here. So that's something that is really beautiful is to look at that mixed age as well.
mm,
And if possible, when possible, regardless of the educational setting that one is in that younger age bracket, if everything's able to be at their level and if there is able to be a more fluidity to movement in allowing the educator to take a step back when things get chaotic and observe the children, I feel like these things can all be implemented if they aren't already. Like, I think that's the beautiful thing about educators is so many people say, do this, do that, do this, but you never know what's going on behind that door. They most likely already are doing all of these things. Unless there's a stressor from behaviors from children and they don't receive that support from school, or they don't have that community support. Like we have a really strong team, Haley, and I feel that's something that's really powerful for
mm,
the world of education is to make sure and ensure every educator has a close-knit group of people that it's not about gossiping, it's about developing the space.
mm.
And that's a huge one for me. Like we're not over here gossiping and we're very mindful of that. It's like what we're speaking about is directly connected to betterment of the self, betterment of one another, or betterment of the youth or families. And there's something real beautiful in that.
Absolutely. I take that for granted because, like, you're absolutely right. Like, we are so fortunate to have cultivated that together as a community in our school of just like, we were talking about this at our meeting recently of like how all of us arrived to this school, and it was just in different ways, but I think there was something that really like we were drawn to this. Something pulled us all together to be in this space in this time. I mean, sure, like I think it's easy to focus on what's not going how we intended it to be going, or things that like how, the mistakes we made or the things we could do differently or but really like how much there is to celebrate. And we do talk about this and that we are offering love and support to one another and the children. And it is so important in this field where it can be really exhausting and depleting sometimes, where we are giving so much energy to other human beings. So to be able to restore that in ourselves and each other, to be able to call on each other, if it's in the moment in the classroom, if we can make eye contact and like, to be able to tap out, tap in, but also outside of the classroom and to be able to come together and have dinner together and just be. And yeah, you're so right. Because I really do feel like when we do come together, it's about growing together as a team, as individuals, and as educators to just better show up. And I love when we enter with that excitement and inspiration to be there. And I see it in all of our staff at different times, just like, partnership. Like maybe somebody gives 90% one day, and the other one, you know, has less in them. They can only give 10%. So I love that we can be there for each other. Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing. And the children see that too. They see that their guides really care about them in different ways. Like it's so amazing. I just love watching like one of our teachers, right? How she is like such an aunt to them. I feel like, she's got all these little like, to me, they just like they are physically like drawn to her. She gives the best hug. She's always there for this comfort. And we all offer something different. And that's what's beautiful about this is that we can hopefully be our authentic selves. And like you talked about earlier, communicate when we are also frustrated. Like if we're, being talked over and again, it's not about centering us. So it's balancing that, right? Where it's like we show up and share those feelings, but in a responsible way, knowing that they are children and maybe what we have to share is not of interest to them. And how do we respond to that and how do we shift that? Sometimes, I think it's like it's situational. It's like how we show up that day, how they show up that day. There are so many factors involved because we can't necessarily always expect them to turn their attention to us immediately, nor should they, because it's not about us. But if we're engaging and enticing them, then we're, inviting them in to be part of that conversation too. And yeah, it's an adventure for sure.
Haley, I
Being an
absolutely
educator.
adore everything that you're saying because our previous guest, Janae Dixon, she has worked with high school children, middle school children, and also now college students. And
Mm.
everything that you're saying is the same, but different from what she said. And
Wow.
that was to show that it doesn't matter the age of the child. It doesn't. What matters is the human to human connection and seeing someone as a human, a fellow peer, and not, I know all, you don't know anything, now I have to teach everything to you. And everything that you just said, Haley, when it comes to our team dynamic and vocally expressing and being our authentic selves. And as educators, how can we bring our authenticity? It's not even how can we bring, how can we simply be our authentic nature, who we
Mm.
are, our passions? How can that be the skins that we choose to wear every day? And witness how that passion then guides the children to discovering their own passions. And when it comes to the communication with the educator, we could do that with the youth. We can so easily witness when I'm giving 90% one day and I have that tank, it may be because there are children who can only give 10%. And then there's going to be days when they can give like their 120% and I'm over there with 0.1% and barely
Mm.
hanging on. And then I say, I'm having a really hard time right now, honey, AKA child who's 3 or AKA child who's 13, and they're really receptive to that. I feel like the
Mm.
more that we're able to show the children that we are a human just like you and we move through these things just like you, the more bonding that happens. And when that bond happens, the more trust and respect takes place reciprocally between the child and the adult. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
all.
Absolutely, Renee. Like that accountability, right? So if we have that 0.1%, so we maybe don't have as much patience and we say something, or we don't like the tone that we shared or we talked over a child when we're always asking them to wait to speak or to wait until we're done talking to be able to have a voice themselves. So when we talk over them and we say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just talked over you. That must not have felt good. I'm not feeling very good today." And that, just to recognize that and how we show up and to let them know it's not about them, it's about how we came in. And so for them to be able to do that the same, right? To have those tools when they enter the classroom and they're having a rough morning, to be able to understand that it's okay to like listen to that and to be able to put words to it if they can and learn how to do that. Such a good tool. I mean, that's what we want to teach, right? Is like be able to just survive in this very complex world. And academics are great, but I really feel like there's so much there is so much more. And it's like that's great if they have this foundation for more abstract math and science later on, great. If they have an understanding of the continents and this like foundation, beautiful. But also, let's give them the tools, or let's learn together. Let's support them in being able to just show up for themselves every day and to be able to take on anything in the world, because that's the most important thing. If they have those skills to be able to communicate when somebody hurt their feelings, and they can take that into anything that they do, to be able to stand up for themselves, to be able to know that they have a voice and that others have a voice too, and to be able to teach empathy. And those are the skills, right? That we just like are surpass any academic lesson.
I love when the two of us get in a conversation about this because like you put two people in a room together who say like social emotional learning without like that tagline or the
Sure.
like
Yeah.
real deep the emotional intelligence and the human like bye-bye academics. And of course there's importance to the academics. I get it for the ones out there who are like we need academics. Like I hear you. Just don't put me in the room to guide that.
Mm. Yeah, and part of me like wishes I had more of an academic preschool and early childhood education. And we're in a time where even when I moved to Haverhill, not even 10 years ago, where I am now, I don't think that there was even full day kindergarten. I think it was optional. So this is very recent, and we hear about this universal pre-K, and many children don't have this opportunity, but it is a beautiful time. This 3 to 6, the absorbent mind, where they're taking it all in. So yes, we can give academics. That's beautiful, and I do support that. But I like let's also feed and fill that absorbent mind with the social emotional things. That's the lasting stuff. I mean, sure, there's like so much to learn, and I do think that if we have like there's going to be more success for this child if they have that foundation, more concrete learning during this time. And also it's easy for them to retain now to make things easier later, if especially if they enter a different setting, or even carrying on Montessori education. But yeah, like let's get that absorbent mind filled with all the good skills, just to make them feel balanced, feel grounded, feel connected to other humans, like all of those skills that we're not taught. Like that's not what, maybe now more so. I'm glad to be parenting, I think, in this time where we can teach to the child more. So let's continue to like focus on that.
Oh yeah, imagine a world where this current generation growing up simply had the support and nurturing environments to cultivate humanity within themselves and with others and to
Mm.
cultivate community and to not be, you know, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, brainwashed into thinking that this is the way to be successful as a human, which is get the good grades, go to college, get married, X, Y, and Z. It's no, how's your heart and how is your heart towards other people? How much
Mm.
are you opening your heart and your love to other people? And when I imagine a world where we have a whole generation of youth growing up in that way, everything changes the moment that they turn 20 because now we have individuals who are innovating like wild for humanity.
Mm.
Yeah. Haley, summarizing all that's been shared today, what's the main core shift you feel is imperative to take action on now that will help build the future educational system?
Mm. Well, I think what came up for me this time with you is this simple yet difficult task to recenter the child and to remember that we are entering into their environment every day and we're going to leave our stuff behind when we enter that environment. So for me to be able to do that more, um, enter openly, right? And with curiosity and with a lens of observation. Yeah, that's what I'm going to focus on is looking at the child more every day. Do you want to share what I mean, I think this is like because we work together too. Is there
Thanks
anything that you feel? Yeah.
Thanks for asking. What I feel is imperative to take action on now when looking at the current and future educational system, whatever that is opening the heart wider as an adult and taking responsibility as an educator of whether the space you're in is actually the space that you're here to be in. It doesn't mean you have to switch position or job. It doesn't mean you have to stop being an educator, but is your current environment the environment that you choose to be all of you in? And when you make that decision, then how beautiful it is to open your heart wider and how
Mhm.
beautiful it is to see the children in that space as well. And everything else, it's an ever unfolding journey. Yeah, it all comes back to love. I feel, to be honest, it all comes back to love. And what's your definition of love? And what's your relationship with love of the self? And then once we have the
Mhm.
definition and relationship of love of the self, then we can begin to transfer this into school environments simply by being who we are. The moment that we are not able to acknowledge or identify the relationship of love with self is the moment that that's the responsibility to check in on yourself because you're most likely pointing the finger at someone else. And that's cool. Everybody does their own journey, everybody goes through it. I've gone years and years and still do point my finger at others. But every single time I do it now, it's like, wow, honey, we need to step back because there's some part of me that's not giving myself love and I'm seeking someone else to do it for me.
Mhm.
And that I feel is connected to education reform and restoration is check in with yourself as an educator and really, really raise your hand to taking that responsibility because you don't know whose lives you're impacting at the end of it all. Haley, thank you. And for all of the people that would love to stay in touch with you or would love to reach out to you, where can they do that? If there is a place to do that.
Great. Yeah, I would love to hear from people and have these conversations. They can find me on many different platforms. Let's see. I guess through our website, right? Friends can visit wistariamontessori.org if they want to explore the school, if they want to connect with me in or outside the classroom, share observations. I would love to hear from people.
Coolio. It's been such a pleasure, Haley, and may we all move forward with love and seeing one another as they are.
Thank you, Renee.